Thank you all for joining us. My name is David Francis, Vice President of Research at Talent Tech Labs. Today we're here to discuss demystifying the contingent workforce. Primarily, I've got three goals today. One is to educate and inform on some contingent workforce trends. Two, talk about ways to use technology, combine that with strategy to increase your program's performance. And three, hopefully give a couple of ideas that are actionable and you can take back to your organization and hopefully implement. So with that, introduce my co-panelists. You want to say a little bit about your backgrounds? Maybe Kevin, we'll start with you. Yeah.
Sure. Kevin Akeroyd. I run Pro Unlimited, which is one of the largest contingent workforce management platforms out there to help companies basically work on everything that's non-full-time employee, that's freelancers or ICs or contract work or you name it. So the other half of the workforce, which is not a full-time employee, we are the platform that companies, especially large Fortune 1000 companies, turn to manage that whole thing. So nice to meet everybody today.
Yeah, I love it. One of the largest, if not, he will acquire the next few that are in his way. Every time I sit down with Kevin, he's got a few more companies under his belt.
We have been acquisitive. That's, guilty as charged, you're right.
So effective 1 year or 1.5 years on the role? But,
I've been in the role for 22 months now.
22 months, okay.
So starting to get the water out from behind the ears and figure it out. Yeah, I don't come from an HR background at all. I come from a CRM and marketing tech background, so for me to jump into the HR side of things has been a great learning curve, but I'm really glad I did it. It's been great. So.
Yeah, so I'm Aashir. I lead up our talent acquisition and talent flex product lines for Eightfold. Prior life, I actually built a direct sourcing platform called Gig Now for EY. And so haphazardly, I ended up here. And again, with the amazing folks on the stage with Kevin and David to really sort of talk about where I, again, look at this, right, the tremendous sort of opportunity around contingent, expanding that space, especially as we were just talking outside, going into a recession.
Brilliant. Yep, I think that's a nice segue. So speaking of the size, it's the contingent workforce it's a huge part of the economy. It's a huge part of the workforce. Maybe we can talk a little bit about kind of what's happened over the course of the pandemic and post-pandemic trends moving forward. How is kind of the pandemic and the growth of remote work changed the workforce, and specifically for contingent?
Yeah, super good question, and I'll try to be succinct on this. Important to note that the pandemic didn't create this. That shift from full-time employees being in the brick and mortar, offices of employers, to non-full-time employees being remote and global, around the world, that was already happening, right? And it was happening relatively aggressively. I think pre-pandemic, the estimate was about 1 in 4 workers was a contingent, and the other 3 out of 4 was an FTE. So
at an organization, at a company level.
At a company, right? Yeah, yeah. So at an organization, at Apple or Nike or right whatever, for a company level, 1 in 4. So COVID didn't create it, but it certainly was a gas can. It accelerated it really, really, really rapidly. Whereas literally 2 years later, most people that you read, whether it's the government or SIA or McKinsey and Deloitte, et cetera, most people already agree that it's now 1 in 2. Right, it's literally half of the workforce. So we've literally gone from 1 in 4 to 1 in 2 in 2 years. So it was a huge accelerant, number one. And number two is not only did that not crush the company's businesses, but corporate profits reached record highs, stock prices reached record highs, right? Corporate performance went through the roof. So it wasn't just a short-term blip that's going to come back down. It actually made companies realize, wow, I could sustain this way, right? And all the benefits from a financial and nimble and, up and down. So it's kind of here to stay. And, most people think it's going to go to 6 out of every 10 workers are going to be contingent. And then the other interesting thing is I think it woke up the talent supply chain, right? The talent. So Nick's this awesome .NET engineer. He doesn't want a full-time job. He wants to get paid through the nose for doing this 9-month project for Google or Apple or Facebook, and then he's going to go skiing and smoke whatever he smokes up at the Tahoe, and, come back down, 3 months later and take another 9-month gig, and he's got 15 job offers, all that are ready to pay him $200 an hour. So digital natives and the great reshuffle and the great resignation, everything, the talent supply chain has shifted to where you now have hundreds of millions of desired white-collar talent that don't want the FTE role, right? They only want the contingent. So even if enterprises didn't want to embrace this shift, they have no choice because the desired talent pool is pushing as hard as the enterprise is. So it's nice because both the hirer, the company and the hiree, the talent, are both really leaning in, and we're kind of coming into a contingent world, which is good.
Yeah, it's kind of
good for companies like us.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. So historically, nobody went to college or didn't go to college or search for the job, and they're like, what I want is to be a temporary worker or that was probably nobody's career dream, right? It just kind of happened, and so I do agree with the sentiment that the narrative is changing and folks are doing it as kind of a lifestyle increasingly.
And it's not just gig workers. It's that $200 an hour engineer.
Right.
Or that finance or that marketing or that ops or that, right? It's the white collar specialty skill people.
Yeah.
Not just the DoorDash and the Uber and things like that, which is important.
Well, you can't even hire anymore, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if I was a data scientist, which I'm not, so good thing. But if I was a data scientist, like going and working for GE is not appealing. But going and working and playing with the amount of data that GE has for 6 months is. And so, again, as I think about this, one thing I'll tie it back to some of the earlier conversations, some of the earlier things that we talked about, the opportunity to come into an organization and upskill yourself by learning on the job and actually picking up these skills is the shift that I see fundamentally that has happened in the last 2 years and really goes back to where it's different from, the last recession or the last, dot-com bust.
Yep.
And that it is not something that's just a passing of the night, but will be here to stay.
Yeah. And David, as you know, this isn't just a phenomenon in tech and in healthcare. I mean, those are the two areas that have really exploded.
Yeah.
There's like a large search engine company in the Bay Area that has 120,000 FTEs and 200,000 contingent. They're already at whatever that is, 65, 70% contingent. But it's not just technology companies and healthcare companies. It's every vertical industry. It's automotive, it's consumer, it's consulting, it's manufacturing, it's financial services. It's literally the entire GDP. It's not just a couple vertical industries.
Yeah. So maybe a controversial question here. Historically, rightly or wrongly, to the extent that a company manages that workforce or has a program set up to manage that, it's the kind of governance is procurement. And so, is that the right role to be making these kind of strategic people decisions? Should it be HR? Should it be talent acquisition?
Yeah, the answer is no. You're right, David. This has historically been a procurement-led function, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. On the one hand, contingent labor is a $5 trillion spend globally a year, so lots of dollars, and it's acknowledged that there's all kinds of waste in the system. So, okay, let's have procurement chase that, but if it's going to be 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 of every single workers, and it is literally reshaping your entire talent landscape, and it is your, future for talent, war for talent, HR has got to get back to the table. And quite frankly, the line of business, needs to get alongside. So the line of business, HR, and NIT, because it's becoming so tech and data enabled. The FTE side with HRIS and HCM, the CIOs at the table, all the time because it's so tech heavy. Not the case here. So. The CIO, the CHRO, and the line of business need to get back in the ring with procurement because it's so strategic to a company's success going forward. But that is not the case right now. This industry is still way, way, way too managed by procurement now.
And I think that a successful program, right? And you can keep me honest, right? With a lot of your customers, the ones that actually truly buy into this is where you get the HR folks and the procurement folks at the table at the same time.
That's right.
And they get the cost savings. The HR people get great people.
That's right.
And faster time to hire. And then, everyone's pretty much happy in this equation. But I think it's when you go strictly after procurement, they're good at buying pencils and laptops, but right. This is probably not their forte or not what they want to do.
And we are seeing it shift.
Yeah.
It's shifted a lot the last 2 years.
Any examples you can name?
No, we're not. No.
Fair enough.
No, but it's starting to turn around. It's 20 years too late. So we need to get HR to accelerate viewing this as the strategic talent management function that it is, rather than just temp labor or project work, which is what it's been the last 20 years.
I'll add an example, right? So again, my past history, Gig Now with EY, I mean, that was the only way we actually did it, was actually get both the procurement folks at the table and the HR folks, and all the cost savings that sort of came out as a result of this helped fund a lot of the HR initiatives, a lot of the procurement initiatives that they wanted to, right? And so you actually, make everyone sort of happy in this, and then the business lines were excited because they were finding great quality talent.
Yeah.
versus relying on the old mechanisms that were in play.
Super well said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a bigger picture question of just like, should cost savings even be the primary driver these days, or should it be if we can't, in healthcare, for example, if we can't find enough nurses and we need to.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has. It's only been a cost savings initiative for the last 25
right?
years.
In a candidate constrained
Yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
you're
That's
hurting
right.
yourself basically.
That's exactly right. It needs to be, my talent is my single biggest asset in my entire company. And I need to treat this as that, right, rather than just a cost savings initiative.
So speaking of, maybe something that's 20 years, should have happened 20 years ago, historically, in the world of contingent, companies, have shied away from using their brand or even advertising the fact that they hire contingent workers. And on the employer side, companies spend millions of dollars. They do incredible amounts of work to kind of manage and curate their employer brand in the hiring process and make sure that application and the way that information is presented is reflects their brand and their culture and their identity. Not so much on the contingent side. It's essentially the common arrangement is to basically outsource it to a staffing supplier. You have no idea what they're doing with the job posting or what that kind of downstream supply chain looks like. So how should organizations be thinking about employer branding in a contingent context?
Yeah, it is. You're so right, David. It's amazing to me. I was like, wait a second. You want us? We're going to go try to find 25,000 top tech talent people this year, and you want us to list it as a company that sounds like a fruit based in the Bay Area instead of your brand, when your brand is an all-powerful, right, talent attracting machine.
Right.
Really? Are you serious? But that has been the case. So the good news now is it's stopped being as qualitative now, and our partnership with Eightfold has been incredible here. Now we can actually show data. We can show stats. Your time to fill, right, could improve by 50, 70, 80%. The quality of the candidate will go way up, right? The cost does come into equation. So the ability to go redeploy that customer, right, for project 2 or project 3 or project 4, if they're like Nick that wants to go skiing in between projects, or the redeployment into full-time employee, because contingent is still a pipeline for FTE, right, and it always will be. So now it's not really a qualitative, subjective debate anymore. It is a look at the stats, right, and no matter what KPI, when you actually go do this and you do it right, branded, right, get legal over it, get branding over it, right, get the hiring managers to realize, nope, this is an important channel to do it this way rather than call the staffing agency. The data, the stats, and the KPIs and the success metrics that companies are having when they do it right, including branding, are kind of hard to argue with. So the good news is we're having a qualitative, objective conversation, and the results are too good to ignore, courtesy of Pro and Eightfold the last 2 years. Yeah.
And I think one thing to add, right? I mean, again, if you think about it on the full-time side, right, the amount of silver medalists, bronze medalists that are sort of passed up, right, when there is a contingent opportunity right around the corner, right? So this ability to go after those folks, provide them an opportunity. They're already engaged with the brand. They already went through the application. They already went through all the hard hurdles of interviewing. There wasn't enough opportunities on the full-time side. And on the contingent side, you're now opening that door. And every time I've talked to customers of yours, customers that we see out and about, that's the thing that they're trying to solve for, is how do I find those people that were really great candidates, their right next opportunity, and it may not be a full-time one at the moment.
Yeah. And Dave, maybe one other thing. So employers must leverage their brand on the contingent side, even though they've been reticent to do so. And there's another important thing, and again, I like to just speak in examples. There's this company here, local 7-star restaurants in the lobby, right, yoga rooms and meditation rooms and doggy daycare and, awesome stuff. And then, awesome buses with Wi-Fi and good coffee to keep you off the road rage and the freeway and everything. Amazing things that are part of the employer brand and why they've been such an incredible talent magnet. All that doesn't matter. That's a full-time employee at the office employer brand. Right. For the 200,000 contingent workers that are remote and global, and the 7-star restaurants and the doggy daycare and the buses going up and down 280 and 101 don't mean anything to the 200,000 remote global contingent workers. So they've got to not only do I have to use my brand, I have to rethink what my employer brand is to that contingent talent, because it's going to be different.
What the value proposition is.
And what the value prop is. That's exactly right. So we got to use our brands as employers, but we need to realize that I can't just cut and paste either. Otherwise, I'll miss. Yeah.
Fascinating. You could also be a good, spokesperson or maybe, ad representative for, come to California and work.
Come to California.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Sip coffee on the bus. So another flavor of this, the direct sourcing is kind of a term that's been associated with using technology along with a process and your brand in order to not have to use staffing suppliers in order to source candidates.
Right.
Companies have been trying to do it for the better part of 10 years or so, and we're only just now starting to see kind of the first real examples, I would say, of companies doing it successfully.
Yeah.
There's still early programs, maybe 12, 18 months in, and so I guess the question is why is this taking so long, and what is a good, how to set up? Do you have any kind of best practices or advice for doing direct sourcing? Right?
It's a very good observation. It is just out of nascency and just finally starting to get adopted. And again, this partnership, we have, we're closing in on a couple dozen of the largest brands in the world that are actually doing it and doing it right. So, the branding and all that stuff, we talked about, it can't just be well, I'm going to try this. There's obviously a huge technology, machine-based learning and artificial intelligence, matching, et cetera. That's what Pro and Eightfold do together. So the tech and the data have finally caught up. Yep. That was a huge unlock that didn't exist until, we did what we did a couple years ago, right? So, and that's not a blatant advertorial for Eightfold and Pro. It's not. It's just the tech had to get there, and the tech is now finally here. That's a big time one. It needed to be important enough to the C-suite, and the CHRO, right? Because I've got strict governance and frameworks and accountability and compliance, and I've got all this stuff on the FTE side. It was the wild, wild west. 1,100 hiring managers can do whatever the heck they want. So all of that framework, compliance, KPIs, governance has had to click in, right?
Yeah.
And then it's had to be held accountable. And again, now here's where the procurement folks are right. I've got $2 billion in contingent spend, and I know there's 40% waste in that. Am I going to go get that $800 million or not? And if I let 1,100 hiring managers just go call their buddy at the staffing agency again because they go to lunch every week, I'm not going to go get it. So there has had to be some compliance, right? Compliance is a tough word, but the dollars do matter.
Governance.
Because they can pay Nick more, right, as talent, and they can fund pretty much everything else that HR wants to fund. But they've got to actually get those 1,100 hiring managers to actually realize, no, this is the preferred way. And then you get better, again, faster. You get better candidate. You have relationships with them. You're not disintermediated, right, by the services firm or the staffing agency. There's all kinds of benefits. And that positive reinforcement that I made the comment earlier, now it's presenting to the board or presenting to the CEO.
Yeah.
We made this shift. Now look what's happening. So that reinforcement loop is happening for the first time, too, which is starting to bear some fruit.
And I think the one thing I would add on to this, right, again, you say this, Kevin, all the time to me, right, the other 50%, right?
Yeah.
And I think the key message here, right, is if you think about it, years ago, it was probably 10, 15%.
Yeah.
Now, when it's 50% of your talent, that's a huge number. The other thing is 4 years ago when we were starting Gig Now and a couple of these other things, asking Fortune 500 companies how many contractors they had, honestly, we sat in so many of these C-suites, they could not answer this question.
They didn't even know.
And some still can't, but again, I think this is where the data is important, right? And when we would come back to them and say, hey, you have 40% of your staffing coming from contingent, their jaws dropped. And I think that's the shift that I'm seeing, David, right? That now is the time when you now realize that you have that significant percentage of your workforce coming from contingent, you need to solve for it.
And even just to satisfy the sourcing needs, right? That's a big thing that this partnership does, is just flat out, where is the talent?
Yeah.
Right.
Where do they sit?
Right.
Because that is so
what
hard
talent's
to
available?
find.
Where is the actual supply?
Where is it? Right. Exactly. And who am I competing for it with? Am I competing against HP and Oracle, or am I competing against Apple and Amazon? Those are two different competitive sets, et cetera. So even that, has just become an aha. And companies that are branding right, adopting an enabling platform, being data-driven and analytical-driven, and then running governance and compliance inside their organizations to make the shift instead of rather relying on individual hiring managers. Those are some of the ingredients of why programs are really starting to hum.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
One last question here, maybe a little bit controversial, and just for the sake of time, if you could answer it briefly. But the role of kind of an MSP as a stakeholder in this whole mix. So you obviously you are an MSP and you also offer VMS technology. in some programs we've seen, in some cases, MSP be more helpful than harmful in setting up a direct sourcing program. In other cases, they're the ones that are actually building it. And is there any kind of best practice there? Or what are your thoughts?
And this is going to sound like an advertisement for Pro. It's not. Okay, it's not. But
at least you admit it.
Yeah, whether it's Pro or any of the other MSPs out there, the recognition that I can't have this done by my staffing agencies because their earnings per share are based on selling you their talent at their prices, right? Not the best talent at the best price. I mean, that sounds really fundamental, but a vendor-neutral, objective third party, right, that can manage that instead of, right, the built-in conflict, which is that staffing agency wants to fill that position with their body at their price. And it's just that simple. So that's a big one, is whether you do it in-house or whether you do it with an MSP, having an objective vendor-neutral rather than somebody whose job it is to get their bodies in your company, right, at their prices is just a Maslow hierarchy of needs, way to think about it. The second one we obviously believe is that it's a pretty fragmented thing. So again, whether it's Pro or whether it's one of the other 24 MSPs out there, letting them actually work with VMS technology, right, the AI technology with Eightfold, the analytics technology, the data. You've got to have, this 30 years of the MSP pointing at the tech and the tech people pointing at the MSP and saying it's
right. Originally, they were always offered together, right? And then there was like this great decoupling, and now maybe there's maybe that's coming back.
And the decoupling's fine, but the MSP needs to be held very accountable for all the tech, because the company, the employer, is outsourcing that function to the MSP.
Right.
The MSP needs to be incredibly tech savvy, and the company needs to let the MSP have that, authority. I think that's the second one. And then the third one, again, is it can't just be, the old way of doing it. The company, you're tech-enabled. You are out there with 11,000 nodes in the supply chain. It is the MSP's responsibility to find every single, piece of talent out there, to optimize it, to match it, to recommend it, right, to onboard it, et cetera. So it's the MSP needs to be held accountable for the entire workflow from initial rec sourcing all the way to offboarding when the project's over and Nick's skiing, and everywhere in between. So that notion of, I'm just the sourcing piece, or I'm just the onboarding piece, or I'm just the background screening piece, no. The MSP needs to be able to be held accountable for the entire thing. So those are a couple things I think companies should think about when and if they're hiring an MSP.
Got it. For this particular content. Great. Okay, cool. So let's move on. And you highlighted talking about technology and not pointing fingers back and forth. So it's a good maybe time to segue into setting me up here. Okay, thank you. So this is, I guess, your opportunity, Aashir, for a little bit of a commercial. So we're seeing on the full-time side, companies start to rethink their strategy around kind of moving away from spans and layers and kind of traditional career hierarchies and org structures towards kind of more of the skills-based approach. Like, what does that look like? Like, essentially, I think of the essence of your guys' partnership is bringing that type of capability to Contingent, right? So what does that look like? Like, how do you use AI in a contingent hiring context?
I mean, again, if I start with this, right? I mean, today there's about 3.5 billion people that are employed in the world, and again, how do you actually find out who's good for what you need them for? How do you then sort of think about what you need to provide them, that training, that upskilling, that mentorship, those next bits, to get them to be very successful? And then I think actually Contingent plays a significant role in that sort of project completion, sort of validation that this person completed this person actually has these skills, they learned these skills. And I think that's where, as I look forward 5 years from now, I mean, again, I'm starting to see the shift of no longer this sort of, full-time and Contingent being such a, one or the other, but some days I'll be a contingent worker or a freelancer or a gigger. Some days I will be a full-time employee, right? And I think that ability to take all of the data, the insights, and do it in a smart and meaningful way, just hasn't existed until now. Yeah. And I think the ability to do it both on the contingent and the full-time side makes it instrumental to be successful.
Kevin, any thoughts you want to add there? I guess what is it that you're bringing to clients? I guess one question maybe specifically for you is, as you've had, you basically sold this partnership and you started to implement it. Yeah. Has there been challenges that have popped up? What have those looked like? And what are any kind of, particularly around the AI? Or there have been big successes that you
No,
can call out?
it's more been the change management inside the large enterprise
Yeah.
that I waxed prophetically on there. And I hate to say that because it sounds like I'm pointing fingers at my customer, which I'm not. It's a big change management inside the organizations. That's been the hurdles. The companies have been blown away by how effective the tech is. Just to be completely honest with you. And again, I sound like an Eightfold advertisement now, but
It's okay.
yeah, I know.
I don't mind.
Got a future in marketing, kid.
But the eyes have been opened in a very positive way. It's like, wow, that would have taken me 500 sourcers, right? 2
Right.
weeks, and I probably would not have gotten anywhere near the caliber of talent. Instead, 5 people took 2 days, and the talent level went up like this, and then I was able to configure it in real time inside the platform to
Yeah.
do that last mile. It's like horses versus automobiles, right? Or BlackBerries versus smartphones. Pick your corny analogy. It's such a step ahead that the clients didn't really know it even existed, but now they see it. They're like, wow. So we're the tech is ahead of the client adopter right now. We're getting very few complaints on the AI. It's exceeding expectations because the clients are starting from zero,
Right.
And all of a sudden we're putting them in this fancy car. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And no. I mean, I was just going to say, once you start to control your own destiny, you want more, right? And so I think, what Kevin is seeing is just the tip of the spear and where we're headed.
Another big piece of the kind of technology kind of ecosystem inside of Contingent is just the data that surrounds it, right? And so you've got this kind of term I think you've coined, integrated workforce management or platform. What does that mean? What does that look like? Why is it important?
Yeah. First, step one is integrating the contingent side. So again, up until this partnership, and here I go again. If I was a large Fortune 500, I needed to choose an MSP, then I needed to choose a curator, then I needed to choose a VMS SaaS company, and then a direct sourcing SaaS company, and then data vendors, and then an analytics company, and then a payroll employee of record company, and then a worker experience company. Right? I literally had to go choose 8 different non-integrated point solutions and spend the next 2 years in people, process, and systems integration hell. Right, those 2 years should have been spent driving business outcomes, winning the war for talent, and getting cost out of my equation. Instead, I'm doing this nightmare of vendor management. So that defragmentizing that so that there's actually one contingent platform rather than 8 or 9 disparate systems is step one. And then once that happens, then you finally have something to plug back into HRIS or HCM at a workflow level, right, at a reporting level,
Right.
and most importantly, at a data level. So
Yeah.
now companies can actually port the data over, and they can actually have a holistic view of the 50% FTE and the 50%. So that's true integrated, but somebody had to come along and kind of integrate the contingent side first.
Yeah.
So the contingent could get integrated into the FTE side, and that's phase 2, David.
Well, I guess one of
Yeah.
the values of using a VMS is you're tracking that kind
That's
of
right.
you're ostensibly tracking that.
That's right.
So, like, how many of the client, or like, what proportion of the client base has? Because it's a common question that we get is like, hey, we want to do kind of like total kind of work size visibility.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a harder, pony to tackle than it should be on paper. So
Everybody's talking about it. Not too many enterprises are doing it well yet.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is
so
it
we
mostly
spend
just
a
involved-
lot of time just helping clients get up the maturity curve.
Got it.
Just to help show them what good looks like. So tons of appetite. Big buzzwords.
Right.
Lots of commitment to get there someday.
Yeah.
But we're in kindergarten. We're not in high school or college. We're literally in kindergarten as far as an industry goes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's still very early days on this, but I mean, the idea of actually being able to look at and workforce plan on total talent is like the holy grail that I feel
Yep.
we're starting to unlock,
Yeah.
especially when you can see the data now on the contingent and the full-time in one view.
And,
I guess-
and it's even something this simple. I could go get this skill set at this price. If I hire that person as an FTE, I could go get this skill set at this price.
Right.
Even again, basic blocking and tackling.
Right.
Let's start there. Right, companies, let's start at the very basics and then start building up. Let's not try to go into space. Let's learn how to drive a bike first, and then a car, and then an airplane, and then we'll get in the spaceship.
Yeah.
But the companies are, the companies are all excited and committed about it. They're just early days.
Yeah. First or second inning. So how far are we from like where that kind of like when are we having the panel talking about like here are the customers that you've rolled out kind of total workforce visibility into?
I think that this accelerates. I don't know how long it took HRIS and HCM to get mature
Right.
Probably 20 years.
Yeah.
I think that happens in 5 on this side, out of just sheer necessity, right? The companies have already been through it. They've been through it with CRM, they've been through it with ERP, they've been through it with procurement, they've been through it with HCM. All the lessons learned, right, can help companies do it in 5 years, would it took them 20 in some of those other areas.
Brilliant.
And then the business benefits, again, whether it's better talent, actually sourcing and getting the talent in the door, the cost reductions, every metric, it just kind of becomes one of those dashboards that the C-suite looks at every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where we get to, is this is part of the mission control panel. And I think that's only a couple years away. Yeah.
Yeah, I would go next year. You could see early cusp of this, right?
Yeah.
Because now the data is in one place that you can actually make these effective decisions as you go into the next fiscal year about planning. And it should never been on a fiscal year. It should be done at like a daily, monthly,
right.
quarterly.
Yep.
All right, we're I think just at time. If anybody does have any questions, do we have time for a question or two, or should we? All right, happy to open it up to the audience. Please wait for the microphone. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or online. We've got one right over here.
Awesome.
Kevin, what kind of company are you going to buy next?
And will it be yours? No.
We have a lot more tech and data stuff to buy. Yeah, we bought all the MSPs we wanted to, so now it's time to buy more tech and data companies.
You see yourself going going into the RPO space as a?
As I mentioned, phase 1 of integrated workforce management, there's so much to do on the contingent side, at the services side, at the software side, at the data side, at the analytics side, at the payroll and employee of record. The short answer is no, because there's so much work to do to actually finally get contingent all in one place and in one platform. So maybe 5 years from now, when we've accomplished that, then it'll make sense to, whether it's on the services side like RPO or an ATS on the software side or a data company on the data side, maybe someday, but right now we're pretty focused on defragmentizing and actually consolidating the contingent side. So that's a 5-year question, not a 5-quarter question.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Good question. Any others? Going once? Going twice? And that will wrap it up. Thank you very
Thanks,
much,
everybody.
Aashir and Kevin.
you.
Appreciate it.